Okay, can everyone grab their seats, please? We're going to start in a minute.
What's the what? Do you need to take my
Are we going to put the titles up on the screen just to explain everyone what it is we're doing? There we go. Okay, so welcome back. Do we have a good lunch? You look like you've all had a good lunch. There's no sleeping in the back, by the way. If you see someone who's looking a little sleepy, give them a push, because we're going to solve the issues of the industry this afternoon. We have made that panel seem, that's quite a boring title, isn't it, actually? Overview of the production, distribution and exhibition markets in France, which I'm fairly sure is not what we're going to be talking about either. So just in case you were excited that we were going to have that discussion, we're not. We're doing something quite different, where we're going to look at the kind of future of cinema, the value chain, the kind of work that we what do we need to do to come together as a business to deal with the realities of the market that we now see? And to do that, we need to understand what those realities are. And then I think we need a kind of honest assessment of, in this case, in this first session, of the value chain, of the relationships between the different parts, of the kind of films we get, and how we can work together in order to improve that situation and build audiences for the future. So we're basically talking about our future. And to help us in this task, we have Juan HERAS. At the end there, you seem a long way away from here, but from Cines Van Dyck in Spain. We have Daniela ZUKLIC from Potsdam. And we have John BARRENECHEA, who you will know from many roles over many years, but now VP Distribution at MUBI, our good friends MUBI. We do like the bag, by the way. Thank you for that. We have LAURENT DUTOIT, who's one of our, I guess we're all in some ways these days hybrid, but both cinema manager, but also leading voice really in distribution, still on the board of EUROPA Distribution, but working across those that divide. And finally, we have Eva. I always get you, but it's ESSEEN or ESSEEN, but anyway, you're going to be whatever. It's ARNDORFF from Triart, and again, I think. And I think one of those businesses that I think is experimenting and looking into all kinds of areas, crossing over from distribution into particularly platform. I guess the platform is now a pretty well-known player in Sweden, and we'll talk about how those things work. So what we're going to try and do is to take all these perspectives, put them all together into a nice pot, and come up with some kind of casserole. I've just had lunch. That's the best I could do. But let's start with you, Juan. Just if we could start first, I think an assessment of where we're at the moment, you know, that kind of perfect storm idea, lots of things going on, but give us your perspective from Spain.
Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Europa Cinema, to Fatima, and to the team, and all those who are attending here, because after lunch, what you normally do in Spain is have a siesta. For 43 years, we've been in the cinema. Yesterday, in the presentation, we talked about the crisis. There have been any number of them over the years in the cinema industry, but we had not a crisis, but a tsunami, which didn't respect anybody, and it swept everyone away. And bit by bit, I think it's a bit like flowers in a field. They're beginning to peek up and show their heads again. We have hope. We've been listening to all those who have been fighting hard with great enthusiasm. The cultural theme is very important. We have to promote this cultural diversity. That's what we're doing here, and I think we'll do so for many years to come. Logically, we've talked a huge amount about young people, how to attract young audiences to the cinema, but my concern, my question now, is how can we get the older people back to the cinemas, those who have gone, not those who have gone forever, but those who are afraid to go back to the movie theater. They watch films in their homes, but they are the real owners of this space where they feel very much at ease and feel welcomed. And they like to enjoy this very important aspect of things. There's been a tsunami, granted, but there's likewise been a wave of solidarity, a huge amount of solidarity throughout these years. And in a way, this remedies this world of solitude, because we are social animals after all. And as social animals, we need to be together with other people. Young people like to be with others. And so the cinema is a way, okay, the older people have left us bit by bit, and then people who used to come to the cinema every week want to come back, but they haven't yet necessarily. If you talk to them in the street, they say, we haven't been back to see a film, but let's see if we can bring them back. I think we've all been making a lot of efforts and doing a lot of work. We're trying to push people bit by bit back into the movie theater. And the idea is to facilitate matters for all these people. We need to talk about the world of the cinema. The world of the cinema is part and parcel of our life. You talk about it, people write about it, it permeates everything, and then it sort of disappeared. People talk now about images, about series, about platforms. People don't talk so much about the cinema, per se, about actual films, areas, places where you watch films. So we need to continue to hope and keep working. I feel hopeful myself. I listen to what distributors have to say. They need to distribute. And perhaps too many films are being released. Every single week you have lots of films being released. And I speak for Spain. I don't know whether the same thing is true of other countries. I believe that there are a huge number of films being released every week, and people can't see them all. Week after week, there are more and more films which people can't see. And what does this create? This creates a huge sense of frustration, because people see that the films are coming and going, and they haven't had time to go and see them. Okay, so in terms of getting people back into the movie theater, they feel very frustrated. They don't have the time to see all the films. So I think, above all, what we have to do, we have to find a way to ensure that films are released at a more leisurely pace, so there's more time, so that people have time to go and see them. And they don't say, okay, I've read about this and that, I've read about this whole mountain of films being released, all this information is flooding people, yet they feel frustrated because they can't do everything, they can't see everything. We can feel very hopeful, but we have to do lots of work and work and work.
There's a tsunami of ideas in there, so let's go through and unpack some of those. If you can unpack a tsunami, I don't think you probably can unpack a tsunami. But the point, you made a number of really big points. So number one point, I think, is the idea that the space itself is still matters. And I think when we're talking about the ecosystem, the role of cinema as a physical space as a key part of the ecosystem is clear. Where I think you're getting into really interesting territory, though, is where you're saying there are simply too many things being released, which then raises a number of questions, because I don't know what you do about a huge number of films being released at any particular time, particularly because you want to build word of mouth. And if you want to build word of mouth, you need time. So what you've got is lots of films on a conveyor belt coming through, and there's no time to stop to actually appreciate them. And by the time you know they're there, they've already gone. So that's what I'm trying to work out. What do we do about that? Because that's a pretty serious position.
Well, there are two lines of thought. You have the internet for young people. That's something they use constantly, and we misuse it so that young people come to the cinema. Now, as to older people, there is the paper which has basically disappeared, and that was like an umbilical cord, a link between the public and the movie theater as a physical space. It was an extension of the film when people went back home. You take the program of the cinema back home. You have the photos that you see every so often. It's like a photo that you look at, and suddenly you see someone's face, and it reminds you of something you've experienced. And this is something we need to offer them. Paper, of course, can also be recycled. It's not a terrible thing to say one can use paper. We need to start using paper again, because it links all the older people. And it's not the internet. And we have to draw closer to the older generation. We have to give them the same things we used to give them in the past, and which speak reams about films. And we need to revert, perhaps, to some of these practices. At all the meetings we have held, we've been talking about supporting films, giving presentations. But I think what's really important is for these audiences to feel that this physical space belongs to them, and they get something in that space which then they can then take back home. It's a question of space and time, and they'll stop feeling so lonely, which is often a feeling that accompanies us.
Okay. Let me just try and summarize this, because I think it's a useful start to the conversation. What's broken is two things. First of all, there is a conveyor belt of films that there are just too many of them, and they're not necessarily relevant to the audience you're looking at. The second thing, though, is that the communication, the promotion of those films to an audience, that those audiences feel that it belongs to them in some way, and you're talking about paper at that point, that seems to be broken. So you're seeing title after title, but it's not necessarily something that you feel any understanding or empathy for. You just, because there's not enough information to differentiate between those two films, between any particular film. So you have a problem with cons that maybe we could do something about. And I think finally, there's not enough time for word of mouth to build, because by the time people do find out what something's about, the film's gone, because it's the conveyor belts going by. And that seems, is that a fair summary of your argument?
It's absolutely perfect. Quite frankly, the time to go and see a film is very important. It's a question of freedom for each spectator. You choose when, with whom, how. This is something that you choose. You choose the place, everything. It's total freedom. A movie theater is a wonderful place. Look at the momentum. Look at all the stages. And often there's great frustration, because you have one film after the other. It's like a stampede. It's like the news. There's one scandal after another. And it seems that we've fallen into this pitfall. It's like vertigo. A cinema should be restful. And I talked about the role of paper because I think paper is of fundamental importance, particularly for a given segment of the population. These adults, mainly women, who adore art, and paper is a medium. It's a link to what they experienced at a given moment in time, because you take the piece of paper back home. It's the exact equivalent to a photo album. When you look through it again, you look through these photos in a given order, and you see all the people again. So all this is paper-based, and the paper-based communication is wonderful for spectators because you can actually take it back, and it reminds you of the experience you had once you're back home.
I'm getting, we're going to pick up ideas through each one. So the idea there is, particularly if you're trying to go for the core demographic of our audience, then we need to find ways to get through that huge tsunami, stampede wave. I feel quite seasick even thinking about it, but we need to find ways of making that work. And for you, that's in some ways going back to a more traditional approach of making sure that it gets across. Let me bring Daniela in at this point. So I think, do you recognize first that idea of just this oversupply and lack of time for anyone in the current, what we now call sustainable new ecosystem? Do you now recognize the issues that JUAN raises?
Danke erstmal für die Einladung.
Thank you very much for your invitation. We have exactly the same problems as in Spain. And we also have to contend with a situation where there's so many films which have difficulty finding their rightful place. We learned something during the pandemic. People showed great solidarity with us, with we art house cinemas in particular. They came to see us. They asked how we were doing. They even showed their solidarity. And when the lockdown finished, they went back to the cinema. I think we're all doing the following thing. The idea is to view the experience in the cinema as a global experience. We hold special events. We hold encounters. We do things for young people. We have special presentations for school children. We're here for everybody. We're trying to maintain contact with all different audiences. Of course, we need the requisite support of distributors, and I think that is similar to what's being said. Too many films are being released at the same time. It means we don't have time to screen all these films properly. We don't have time to address all the audiences properly. When you have too many films in the course of the year, that means you just have 2 or 3 weeks to actually use them to the hilt. That means people don't necessarily have time to come and see us, and we lose their trust.
Was wir brauchen außer Zeit ist.
And we need something more than just time. We need money. We need support. The cinema is a cultural venue, and it needs to be consolidated. We need public money to this end. I heard what the American colleague was saying. With the 200,000 euros they get every year, and with their huge team, I'd like to have that much money to do everything I want to do in order to screen films and pay my staff. But I don't get that financial support like the one that we talked about in the US. Distributors themselves don't invest enough money in marketing. I don't want to speak into general terms, but there are a lot of distributors who invest too little in terms of energy, or invest too little time and money. So the upshot is that we have to cover a lot of the costs required to distribute films, to show them to a big audience. I need to do B2B. I need to be on the social networks, and all that costs a lot of money.
Translation. So I think there's a big point in here. For you, the problems of distribution, at least part of the distribution business, that they don't have the money anymore probably for economic reasons, and there's a lot of, and you're tending to put out lots of films rather than well-financed single marketing campaigns. You're saying that puts the emphasis back on cinemas, that you do more of the marketing, that you're doing more of the education, the work to make those films work. But what you're also saying is, we're happy to do that, we'll make those venues work for these things, but you've got to give us money. So, and you know, you need the investment, you need to have the money to be able to do those. So I get all of that. The question then becomes, where's the money from? You know, where does that money come from? Where do we give you the finance to allow you to do the things that you say you would like to do, to back the bigger films and make them stronger and build word of mouth?
Oh, ich glaube, ein guter Ansatz wäre, dass wir mehr.
I think that there's a good approach which would consist in keeping more of the money from the admissions we have. I don't know whether it's the same thing. We have to pay 47% to the distributors. If I could keep more to finance my own costs, that would help me no end. I know that certain people find this a bit provocative amongst the distributors in any event. But we are the ones who keep the cinemas alive. We are being asked to be sustainable. We are being asked to change our technical equipment. We have to invest in marketing and so on and so forth. And that all costs a lot of money, and the money has to come from somewhere. The films cost more and more. I understand that. Distributors only have to heat one office, though, but I have to heat a lot of rooms. I have to invest in sustainability, and I have been doing this for several years now. We have organic wine, we have all sorts of things we sell. We have local partners who we work with and who give us, supply us with certain products. And this is all a huge amount of work and a lot of overheads. I know it's difficult to get money from the communes and from the towns. We are private companies, after all. So the only thing that could help us to finance everything we're trying to do would be to be able to keep more money from the tickets we sell.
Let me move on to Laurent, because I think we've nailed two what seem very clear points, that right now in this market there is an oversupply of content, of not very good content. There's a lack of really great focused content and that are backed by really fantastic marketing campaigns. What you're saying is, which I think it follows exactly what Juan was saying, give us the money and we will turn these things into fantastic opportunities, and we'll do that by building our audience. Laurent, you're seeing both sides of these things, but you probably recognize the economic issue underlying there, but presumably from a distributor point of view, there's also a feeling that you know, you also have those problems. The money that's going into distribution in the first place in terms of public funds is a problem. But just give me your perspective, having heard those things.
Yeah, it's funny, and I'm both. So it's when I'm with the distributor, the exhibitors are the bad guys. When I'm with the exhibitors, it's all the problems comes from the distributor. And when we talk to the producer, it's also the distributor the problem. So when you are a distributor, you're always the bad guys from someone. We spoke about the number of films that are distributed, that are released, and I think it could be interesting to raise hands who in the room thinks there are too many films that are released in their cinemas, in their country every year. So it's not that many. And who thinks there are not enough films that are released?
Like 30%.
Yeah. And so there are a lot of Swiss guys, they don't take, they are neutral, they don't want to vote. I also think that there are too many films that are produced and then released, and that's a problem for the diversity. We have incentives to make films circulate, and when the films are produced, a lot of all the producers want the film to circulate and to be released, and in the end there are so many that it's difficult, it's hard to find an audience with them. Regarding this the marketing thing and so I think it's difficult to say that distributors are not doing enough marketing and then saying, okay, they won't do more if you give them less money to do so. So we are in an era where everything is changing, and I also think we need to find a new equilibrium. We have a production system where most of the films are produced with 100% of public fundings. Then as a distributor, it really depends of your kind of distributor, but I think it's between maybe 15 to 25% of your overall revenues that are from public fundings, from subsidies, and the rest is from the market. And when you are a cinema, it's a question I asked yesterday morning to the French representative of the cinema, to what's the average percentage of subsidies that you get, and I didn't get an answer, but it certainly is different from one cinema, from one country to another, to one kind of cinema to another. But for instance, in my cinema, it's 3% of public fundings. And of course, it's difficult to have all those films that are produced with public fundings trying to come to a market that is based on a liberal system, so we need to get some audience to pay the tickets to level it up. So I'm sure, and we are all member of the network EUROPA Cinema, so we are getting some public fundings for it, which are important, but the amount that we get from the network is still quite small. For my cinema, it's 1% of my of the budget. So it's good to have, but it's not enough. So we'll need to have a political pressure to say also the importance of the cinemas, and the fact that we need some backup, local, bit national, bit from the European Commission. I think
yeah, let's come to, the argument always ends up when we do these things as between exhibitor and distributor. But the reality is, in lots of cases, those films have come from somewhere, and the reality, having worked in public film funds, the reality is you need to keep using up the money, even if there's a bad film. You're incentivized to make more and more films. And what everyone says, I mean, the underlying real reality that you're all saying is there's too many bad films and there's not enough good films. And I remember my daughter doing a speech when she was 10, and I was doing a speech to a public fund about exactly this problem. She said, why don't you just make less films but make better ones? And that's really the ecosystem we're trying to get to, isn't it? It's kind of, but what you would argue is, if you took less of them, if you took even a fraction of the money that's going into subsidizing some of those films and put that into marketing and distribution, and then that fed up the value chain, then the ecosystem would work better. That's the argument you're all making, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's important, and it's what we are going to we need to get in the coming months and years, and not only on distribution but also on exhibition. And I think it's useless if the market stays with the. We saw that the market is 35% down. We can't continue to produce that many films if the market has sunk. So we need also maybe to take a portion of this money to put into the distribution in order for those films to be
yeah, so the market only really kicks in at the point of distribution, of sales, distribution, and exhibition. Before that, it's you know, as you say, there's sometimes 100% subsidies. But tell me, in terms of the balance between online and offline now, I mean, you presumably are also trying to do this thing with making VOD work alongside, and how does that work? Because that would, the idea, the dream was that somehow VOD would replace some of those things, and you would be getting revenues in that allowed you to do more marketing.
Yeah, because what we often forget is that when we are a distributor, we are not only releasing film on theatrical, we are also doing our best to have the best revenues on video, on VOD, and on television. And it's been years that we were saying, okay, the theatrical distribution is the old world, the new world is online, and it's something that we tend not to find out by ourselves. And the main issue, the main problem on the online is that we still don't really have the figures. We know what the offer is, but as the platforms are keeping secret the number of views, it's something that we don't have, and I think it's a problem. In Switzerland, we had a law a few years ago, and now all the platforms, so including Netflix and so on, are forced to give the figures, the number of views on their platforms, and so we can begin to have a view on the overall market in Switzerland. And it's quite interesting because we just had the figures of 2021, and if we look at the TVOD numbers, sales and rental, last year in 2021, the number of rental and sales were 50% below the number of 2017, so 4 years ago. In 4 years, and despite the COVID, the lockdown, and so on, the TVOD market is 50% below, and the number of people who rent or buy a film on TVOD was, I think, 5.3 million, and the number of admission in the cinema last year, when the cinema were closed during 4 months, were 5.5 million. So we did more admission in the cinema with lockdown than the TVOD. On the opposite, the SVOD services went up. Between 2017 and 2021, it's 5 times bigger, but then it's mostly on American films. If we look at the Swiss films that are on the platforms, on SVOD platforms, it represents 9% of the offer. And on the number of views, we don't have the precise amount, but the Federal Office of Statistics is saying extremely below 1%. So those films are there, but the availability is not enough. We need also for them to be seen, and it's not because the film is available that people will see them. And it's still way beyond the number of the market share of Swiss films.
That's a really interesting statistic. I mean, the transactional VOD, which is where distributors do make some measurable, provable money, that's where someone has actually chosen to go and watch a film. So, but the money's gone towards SVOD, which is just, you know, you don't know whether anyone's watching your film, you're just in there, and the returns. So is just because it's part of this ecosystem we're talking about, is Netflix and the big SVODs, are they a problem? Are they a genuine problem on a day-to-day, addressing the problems we've heard so far? Are they a disruptive force still, or are they somehow, can you fit them within this ecosystem?
They are in their world. They don't know us. They don't want to know us. Me, I can't sell a film to Netflix because they are not interested on that. In the bigger markets, they can, but not in a small market like Switzerland. And for them, the important is not really the film; it's the brand. And they are selling a brand and selling subscription because it's their way to earn money. And they don't really they don't really care about diversity. They are doing what gives them the most income, and most of the time it's mainstream films.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to move to Eva, but I think that, again, you've added something to the discussion here, which is making the last bit, the bit that connects European cultural diverse content to audiences is the bit that's the last kind of in the line when it comes to financing, and it's the one that's most susceptible to the market issues. And you're saying it's really more focus on supporting that would actually put you in line and maybe working with Daniela rather than having to share out a small amount of money between you. That's the argument. Eva, you're I mean, you are working in that kind of VOD world. You see those platforms as part of your world. Just give us, first of all, a sense of your business, and then maybe give us some reactions to what you've heard.
There's so many things to react to. Very short, Triart film. We are a distribution company, mostly focusing actually on theatrical distribution. But when we set up the company 12 years ago, we also said that we wanted to be able to control one distribution window, since we have a monopoly situation, more or less, in the Swedish market when it comes to cinema. So then we started the streaming service Triart Play, and that was actually, we started it in order to be able to have films on cinema, because we wanted to be sure that if everyone says no to a film, or the owner says no to a film, we at least know that we can get some money from our own streaming service. Because as you say, the other streaming services back then and now, they're mainly focused on the bigger mainstream films. So yes, we would be available there, but no one would see our films because they would be sort of in the bottom of the catalog. So today we have both the streaming service and the theatrical distribution working alongside together. And I think reaction to so many things here. When you talk about the paper again on the cinema, because I agree with, we have a problem that we don't see the regular cinema goer coming back after pandemic. So we have also said that, okay, let's not only chase the young ones. Maybe they are out skateboarding or something, and maybe that is what they should do, or go to a bar. And then they will grow old and hopefully come back to the cinema. But how do we get these older people back? So then we looked at the theater, and they always have this little brochure with an interview with director, etc. So now we hand that out, and that way we can also, they are happy because they get something to read, and we can put a little card saying that, okay, you're now seeing the new Claire Denis film on cinema, go home and see the catalog on Triart Play. So that way we can also monetize on our older titles. And then there are too many films. I would say that as a distributor, if I look on that side of the business, our main job, my sister said once, you see all the crap for us, so we don't have to have everything on the screen. And I was like, yeah, that's what we do. We see so many films every year, and we say no to so many films. Exhibitors come to us and say, why didn't you take that one? Because there are so many films, we cannot bring everything to Sweden. But still there's nothing to see on the cinema. So many people come to us and say, why can't I see this? As you say, they're only there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I'm one of those who really like to cooperate and not put the blame on anyone, but sometimes I can look at exhibitors saying, you don't have to screen everything. Yes, there are a lot of releases, but all films doesn't have to be on every cinema. Because that is a problem, at least now. This is very Swedish, maybe. I'm not sure how it looks on your markets. But one or few of the blockbusters maybe don't have to be screened on the art house scenes. If you actually dared to stick with the art house film and give them the week, I can promise you that distributors, they would put on more marketing money. Because we also have to look on the number of seats we have available. If we see that if we put in more money on the marketing, we know already now, without covering our salaries, that we will lose money on this release. But if we sort of together say that, hey, let's give this title a month, we dare to do so, even though there are 2 or 3 new titles coming in. Maybe we could change something in the long run. And there's also the subsidies there. I think the film institutes also, everyone has to give exhibitors enough support so they do not have to make that choice. If they are going to choose, shall I screen Top Gun 2, or shall I take this French art house film? The support for the French art house film should be enough so they dare to say no to Top Gun 2. So those were sort of the first reactions.
Well, that's pretty good. So that last point, let's do that one first. So, well, in fact, it's all the argument that I think was being made by JUAN and by Daniela is, look, we're stuck with a situation where we have to show these films, and what you're saying is, well, you don't, but you're going to have to be pretty brave about doing it, and that's perhaps where money comes in here. I mean, the bravery to say no to Top Gun is I think one that the ecosystem's all about. So my local art house cinema has started showing Marvel films and all the rest of it because they think that's going to help them survive, but actually it just means that people like me think, well, I'm just not interested in you anymore. It's difficult. So what you want is for it to feel comfortable for an art house cinema to show a film they know works with that audience and to do what they do best. You seem quite optimistic that that can be done, and maybe the platform picks up all the slack. It picks up the stuff that no one uses. And I really get that idea, but it feels that's not what I hear from many people in the room.
I know. But I think it's really important to believe that we can make some change. I mean, I agree also that, I mean, we're a small company, and people running the company, we own the company. Of course, we have to survive, but we don't have to make a lot of profit. So we can also dare to be brave in a way. So when we see something that we feel that this has to be changed, we can give it a try. So when we saw that no one is writing about film in a serious way in Sweden anymore, then we started an online paper to see, does it fly? Can we do something about this situation? And I do believe that there are a lot of brave people out there, but I think we all should start talking, as we say, backwards also in the value chain, or how to put it. I sometimes get frustrated that I still negotiate MGs on the same level as I did 20 years ago when pay TV was paying a lot of money, which they don't anymore. And I have a cap on the P&A. Shouldn't it be the opposite? Shouldn't us distributors instead say that I promise you that I will negotiate the amount of the P&A instead, saying that I will put all of this money, I will put my risk in the marketing, so we maybe can drive people to the cinemas, instead of saying, I promise you I will not spend too much money on the marketing, but I will pay you a lot of MGs. It's something wrong with how the world looks today and that business model. So,
yeah, no, you put that really well. I think, Daniela, did you want to come back on that point?
Also ich glaube, ich muss mal noch eine Lanze für uns Arthur.
Yes. Of course, I'm waging a real campaign for our art house cinemas. I think it's very important for us to be able to do our work properly. But there are too many films. You're right, Eva. We need to combine our efforts as exhibitors and distributors. We need to work together in order to really support films and give them the requisite space they need. That's what it's all about. And I therefore believe that we need perhaps to reduce certain amounts for not all films have to be shown in movie theaters, even if they got public support. They don't all necessarily have to be distributed in movie theaters. It's up to us to make a choice and to focus on quality.
I mean, what we're saying is where the money has disappeared from the market, it's all been in the area you are. The things that were certainties, the pay TVs, the DVDs, they've gone. And so you're now trying to deal in an uncertain world, and so that's changed the economics, but actually the money, that's where it's all disappeared from. And meanwhile, we're having a boom in production during a bust. So this situation isn't getting any better. But John, you've seen this from a lot of different angles, and MUBI, of course, is I think is making its name to a large extent by playing this. Not playing. You are seeing yourselves as partners rather than opposition. That you see yourselves in some ways as belonging to the same culture that the EUROPA Cinemas members are in. So, first of all, tell us your perspective from your point of view, and I'd be really interested to hear what you've thought, having heard the conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a room I've been coming to since before I worked at MUBI. As you said before, many of the people that work at MUBI were old world, so to speak, but we're working in a digital company that is really a media company. We're not a streaming company. Of course, we stream films, but we also produce films. We release them theatrically in multiple markets. And of course, we partner with cinemas to develop that culture, which I do feel part of being in this room. And I think it goes without saying, like, our cinephile and theatrical bona fides, we have tried to earn those and demonstrate that it's not a slogan, it's real. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, did you have a question, or should I comment on these guys? I'm happy to jump in.
I mean, I'm interested because you have been on a lot of sides of this fence, and it feels like things have moved on to a small extent. So we're still having some of those same arguments, but the realities that it comes down to, it seems to me, are becoming much, much clearer, which is in the world now, we're competing with thousands of other things to do. In the days when we were kids, when you had 3 channels of TV, and you had to go out and play and use your imagination.
I don't think anyone is that old in here.
Can you imagine?
But I know what you mean.
I'm just looking at your grey beard and thinking, you must be the same. But you said every year the competition for time is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the reality we have is that we're trying to find an ecosystem in which audiences are able to connect with content in ways that can compete with all this myriad of other things that can be done. And it's not about will that young person watch the movie online. They won't watch that movie at all. They might be going and playing games. They might be doing hundreds of other things. We have to be better than ever before in order to compete in that world. We need the content, we need the ideas, but we are hitting, it seems to me, a problem which is being raised here, which is we're doing it through volume, which doesn't work. And I guess the MUBI model is exactly the opposite of that. You move from volume towards...
Yeah, I suppose curation is how, MUBI started as a sort of an online film festival with one film added each day and one film removed each day. That model has changed now, and there's a library in there, but it's the key thing is that each one of those films is handpicked. It isn't about uploading 1,000 titles from some studio catalog and hope people will find it. Curation, context, we publish a printed magazine. We have 2 podcasts, obviously The Notebook. So there's all the contextual part that we add to the film is very much, I think, addressing kind of what these guys are saying, which is, we're not making potatoes here. You don't just produce 1,000 kilos of potatoes and sell them at 5 cents a kilo. Each one of the products, so to speak, that we handle is completely unique. And the way people interact with that product or content is also unique and unpredictable. Nobody here knows exactly what film is going to be successful. If we did, we wouldn't be here. We'd be in the Bahamas. But I think that perhaps theatrical, because I think really what people want to talk about here is like, how do we fix this problem? COVID, the tsunami came, now we're 30 to 40% down, and art house probably even lower. And I think going to the movies is a habit. It's not like going to a sports event or a concert. Those are appointment things. The cinema, and it's a habit that many of us have lost, even myself, of just regularly going to your local cinema. And what Juan was saying, the older audience has, in particular, lost that habit. I don't think they're afraid of COVID anymore. They've just lost the habit. They were afraid at the beginning, and now it's gone. And young people, at least from our point of view, both on the platform and theatrically. That is the growth sector. The young people are coming out more. I think they suffered even more from COVID because, you know, they wanted to be out. And so you see this pent-up demand amongst young people coming to see films. So I think the problem, the last time I was here, we were talking about young audience development. And we maybe need a new kind of older audience development section. But I don't think we need to, I mean, you know, I'm optimistic because those young people, they're still young.
Yeah.
We got 30 to 40 years out of that last generation of going to the cinema. This generation is coming up. They're very film literate. They're very aware of everything that's happening. I think we're in a very good place from a, you know, from a cultural point of view. Yes, there are bigger issues that we're all facing around distraction and the phone and so on. But ultimately, you know, there was no difference. I mean, 30 years ago, like you said, your parents probably said you watch too much TV. It's going to break your brain. We've been saying the same things over and over again. I think ultimately good content handled by smart, good people will get to audiences.
I think this is, I mean, this gets down to the point, the absolute core point of all of this. There is a feeling that's come out of this conference of optimism in the sense that cinemas are a great product. Right now, the social place within towns where shopping and all the rest of it's falling apart is fantastic. We heard from, albeit the most extraordinary culture minister I've ever seen, was talking about how culture matters. It matters in enormous ways in terms of policy and the change that can be made. There are new mechanisms for connecting, and you know, paper's one mechanism for one demographic, but those options are there. The MUBI, you know, the MUBI idea of having the online and the offline working together, and I think Triart are doing the same thing, seems like it's going to work. But so it feels in some ways like we're talking about of having the tools to deal with a crisis, but not necessarily having the money or the structure to be able to actually exploit that in the way that it could be exploited, that could take us to that next level. But is that over-optimistic?
I mean, people who know me in this room know that I'm not an optimistic person. However, when it comes to this, I think we have to be objective and just, you know, look at the data. Yes, a lot of this is about recovering from, you know, a once-in-a-lifetime event. And I think in Lisbon, last time I was here, someone asked me as a streamer, do you think there's a future for theatrical? And what I said at the time, I think, was, there's a future for theatrical as long as people are allowed to be in a room together. And of course, that happened and we weren't, but it has to be a life, like a civilization-threatening event for people to stop coming together into a room to watch a movie. I think that's 100% true, and we will always have that in some cycle. We're going through, obviously, lots of changes, and streaming, COVID boosted streaming enormously for everyone who streams. But it's stabilizing, and there's going to be fluctuations there. But it's, you know, it's the new home entertainment system. It's no different from DVDs or Blu-rays, which we also make, by the way, for all our films, because I think physical media is also important, as important in the sense as cinema, because, you know, you have that, you're not licensing the content, it's yours, and that's important as an experience. Same as going to the movies, you own that experience. You're not licensing it from a streamer. So I'm optimistic.
No, that's really good. And it goes back in some ways to Laurent Creton's extraordinary 1990s PowerPoint the other day. I didn't know you could actually still do that. I don't know, it must be on a first edition Apple Mac. But the point he was making was still a good one, which was, and you're saying there is, you know, we keep looking at it like there's these, I mean, tsunami and wave is the wrong way to look at it. You know, you have these moments where there are lots of other things, and then things come back and then they go away. There's trends.
Anyone who was an exhibitor in the 80s remembers how dark things were. In any country, pretty much, it was really, in mid-80s was the low point for theatrical exhibition. And of course, COVID is and that one perhaps was more made by, in a way, the players in that market, and this one was completely out of our control. Yeah. And I think considering everything that we went through, and you know, cinemas did.
So I was at school in the 1980s, obviously, while you were doing your first thing. Sorry.
Sí, yo quería apuntar.
I would like to say a couple of things. One said that going to the cinema is a habit. Yes. But going to see films turns into a habit. Each film is unique. It's something totally special. So what we have to do is to try and ensure that each film is something special. It's not just a habit to go to the cinema. You want to say, I really want to go and see that film. You talked about the 80s, when in the 80s we didn't have this overproduction we currently have. There was a scarcity of films. Yes, but you didn't have such big audiences, too. Yeah, the times were totally different. Everything was totally different depending on the country. But now, I think that what we have is a universal problem. In the past, the situation was specific to given zones or countries or fashions. Now, the situation applies to all. The lockdowns were for everyone. The fear experience was by everyone. And the desire to go out, that's something everyone feels. What I'm trying to say is that screening so many films every week, so many releases every week, has turned something special into something which is commonplace. And I think we can do a lot to offset this situation. That's what I wanted to say.
Very good one, and one that we've raised. Has anyone got any questions from or points they want to make? Yes, there's one in the middle there. Is there a mic? Yeah, it's on its way. Lauren's going to race this bit here. And if you could give your name as usual, you know the drill.
Oui, je trouve ça très intéressant.
I think that's very interesting. Before defining the new ecosystem, we have to agree on what the current ecosystem is. The current ecosystem is producers, distributors, exhibitors, and the public, or audiences in the plural. There isn't just one ecosystem. There's a whole coexistence, which is difficult, but it's a pious hope often to say that there should be a reconciliation, because you have exhibition and distribution, which are very different areas. I think it's a pity. I'm an exhibitor. I'm one of the people who think that exhibition is the weak link, and I think no, I think it's distribution that's the weak link. Distribution is very fragile. There are lots of different audiences. You have this duality. I don't know. I think we have to make the relationship between distributors and exhibitors more peaceful. We've talked about this time and again. You asked a question, are there too many films or not enough? And I didn't answer. Why? Because I think you have to give thought to the matter. In absolute terms, there are lots and lots of films, yet there aren't that many. No one will have failed to notice that some American films have disappeared from the catalogue. So there are far fewer real blockbusters. And I'm an exhibitor who watches a lot of films. I spend a lot of my days watching films. And there's some films you discard right away because they're simply not good. The post-prod is horrible. So once you've sorted things out, you don't have that many films left. So in absolute terms, there are piles of films, but when all is said and done, there's almost a scarcity of really good films. If you ask someone, what do you think a quality film is, you'll get lots of very motley answers. I believe that we really have to make an effort to ensure there's peaceful coexistence between distribution and exhibition. I show a lot of art house films. I also show blockbusters, and I need these blockbusters because that enables me to have the means. They're limited because of COVID. That enables me to show art house films as well. And we want to focus our attention on art house films. So we need to have this whole ecosystem. We don't need a whole pile of ecosystems. There should be just one. I'm very happy to hear people saying that we should bring paper back. And I have edited a number of things myself, and for years now I've been fighting with paper, and I get fantastic results with paper. Maybe I'm a real has-been because I use paper, but fashion is a cycle. When you're a has-been, you'll become fashionable later on again. So I'm clearly out of fashion, but I'm happy to feel that I'm in good company with one HERAS. And there's one last thing I wanted to say. Prior to COVID, the French model was analyzed and observed, which is wonderful. People say it's great, it works well. Now the French model is like all the other models. It doesn't work as well anymore. So you shouldn't flail your arms and say, what can we do? We need to find ideas to recover from the situation. The COVID crisis was a bit like a shipwreck. What worked in the past, well, we can always start doing that again. But things have changed. You have the public, you have the audience. And audiences got scared. This Darwinian function, which consists in reaching out to other people, being gregarious, which is the very survival of the human race, well, that's been terribly upset because of COVID. There are lots of things we can do. I've heard some really interesting points being made. But it's only time that will perhaps repair the situation. And in the meantime, we can look for solutions, but I think we have to admit that not all these solutions will be efficient and will produce effects.
Has-beens. I mean, the points you're raising, I think, back up some of what's being said here. We might. Were there any other? Because that was a point rather than a question at the end of there. Did anyone else have a question or a point they wanted to raise? Yes, at the front here.
Hello, I'm Koen Monseré from Louvain, the non-profit organization FONC with 4 screens. We are also distribution, and we have 2 film festivals, DocFil and the Short Film Festival Leuven, just to introduce. And I'm rather new in the business, so probably I will say stupid things. But I was wondering, because I was raised in the 80s, in the dark 80s, there I became a cinephile. In Flanders, because I'm from Flanders, the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and we have not enough screens. So I don't know if that is in the rest of Europe also a problem. But yesterday I heard in Italy and in Spain there are a lot of venues that are closing. So I think there are not too much films, there are not enough screens, but that's probably a wider scope.
Yeah, it's a big point, and it gets raised a lot. Do we overproduce or are we underscreened? It's kind of a discussion, but the economics doesn't really allow you to do the other side where you build loads more screens in order to have that. And that's really where I think the worry is, that to finish this panel, which that point's a really strong one. We've got the people. When I'm at this conference and you're in these workshops, there are brilliant people. There is a new generation coming through. I'd say with Lauren here as well, the Europa Distribution Conference where Eva was talking, there are some brilliant people with brilliant ideas, looking at what's happening in the with MUBI. I imagine a lot of you are customers. It seems to me a model has evolved and is coming through, and it's beginning even now to produce films, and good films. So I see all this talent and I see all these ideas, and you see how at the end of this you should be able to come through. These are much smarter thinking I'm hearing now, even than at any time I can remember, having done this conference for 18 years, which is rather a long time now I think about it. But there's a really smart thing, but it feels like it's almost a race against time now. It feels like we can get this back, but this period, which I think you're all alluding to, is dangerous, because at this particular period, it will, with the efforts that are going on, pick up. But in order for it to pick up, you've got to get over a pretty serious curve that we're in at the moment that I think, Juan, going right back to the beginning. And it seems that getting through that curve requires finance, which I think is what Daniela was saying. It requires partnership, which is, I think, the point saying there is no point in having arguments about things where you are basically on the same side. And it needs to focus on your core skills, which are curation. They are about building those relationships with audiences. So I think what we've got out of this panel is we don't need to rip the system up, but the way that this part of the value chain is working can be incredibly strong. But there needs to be some rebalancing, and that rebalancing probably is an issue for public funding. In fact, it certainly is. It's an issue around finance, it's an issue around partnerships, and it's an issue that I think is going to be pretty difficult to do because you're doing it under live fire. But I still think what we're hearing from here, it's the same message we've been hearing all along, that there are reasons for optimism, and that with the right people and time on our side, this sustainable ecosystem is possible and even probable if we can get over that hump. Is that fair? Okay, then that's the panel. Thank you. Okay, so this panel, we're going for the dynamic titles now. Fighting for Film, an art form with a future. That's cool, isn't it? That's good. That's no has-beens title. That's a fighting title. And for this this session was inspired somewhat by the death of Jean-Luc Godard this year, because it was making us think about that notion of the importance of film as an art form, and the idea that film, when you'd speak to certain people, they talk about content as if film is nothing more than content to be shown anywhere, and that relationship between film and exhibition and audience as something unique and something different, I think is really important to this thing. And then we'll look at some of the kind of superstructure around that, you know, the idea of the critics, the idea of all the things that make cinema and film something which is worth fighting for. We'll look at where some of those things are problematic or otherwise. While we're waiting, Jan de Vries, Kino, Rotterdam in the Netherlands. The great Stefano Massensi, Lucky Red, one of our the leading European distributors. Katarzyna Siniarska, head of sales at New Europe Film Sales, and president of EUROPA International in Poland. And we have José Luis Cienfuegos. Is that a good pronunciation? That's good. Director of the Sevilla European Film Festival. So apologies, when I was trying to say, it probably came out rather rude, but I wasn't meant to be being rude. I was trying to be... Anyway, it's done. So the point that you're making here, there are a few things that are problems when we come to Jan. There are some clear problems. So one is some things that may get worse. So the economic concerns that you talk about, people don't think it's the money they're spending for cinema. That's likely to become more of a problem, not less of a problem, with rising energy costs and with general feeling of poverty, I think, more among people. I think it's very interesting, that idea of the competition between platforms and cinemas. And I thought Laurent's survey, I thought, was a really interesting one, showing that TVOD had actually gone down more than art house cinemas. So again, it may be that people just aren't watching films at all, that actually they're not going to watch them on TVOD any more than they're watching them in cinemas. Which brings us to the point, I think, which is at the heart of this, which is, does cinema still matter? Is it still that unique experience which allows us to build and bring people back, and maybe some of them are forgotten about? And what is at the essence, and what can we do to fight for that experience and that unique culture, if that is what it is and it's still relevant today?
Yeah. It is.
There we go. That's that one answered.
No, of course. I'm sorry. No, but I think it is. But I think we're really talking about how many movies and you know the ugly words that is being repeated and everybody hates it. But content, and I think that John from MUBI said it really well. I think curatorship and the way that you message something is way more important than just sort of dumping content, which is what Netflix is doing as well. And I think everybody here who has a Netflix subscription knows the sort of doom scrolling you do through Netflix, and then you go like, all right, well, now I don't even have time to watch anything. I just, you know, try to select something. And I think that's because of the sort of the overwhelming amount of stuff that you can choose from. And I think a cinema can be a place where you can, in an informal way, be able to communicate and curate to people what you are enthusiastic about, and then sort of earn the trust from people that been there before. And you start easy, and then you sort of, you know, lead people a little bit with your special programming into discovering stuff that you as a programmer maybe watch. So, and I think the premiere movies is something that you lead, the audience is leading. You program films that you think people would want to see. So you go, well, you know, I don't like Bohemian Rhapsody, but I'm gonna program it because a lot of people do. The other way around is that with the special programming, and we do a lot of that. We do a lot of classics and specials at Kino. Is a way of expressing what we are. It's sort of shaping a profile, and that's what we're trying to do. And that sort of gives people the idea of like, hey, these guys sort of know what they're talking about, or they are movie buffs or movie lovers like we are, and then they sort of tend to sort of give you a little bit of a leadway in discovering new titles as well.
Do you think we're a bit defensive in some ways? I mean, I look at I think of panels I've been on recently. One, you know, there was some time where series were trying to say we're as good as films, series, and that's fine. That's a discussion that wasn't really worth having, but it was one that there was a lot of promotion of series and the golden age of television. And on the other side, where I see cinema being promoted as an art form most, is actually tends to be that multiplex advert, which is all about superheroes taking you out of yourself and becoming big. You've got to hear the crashes and the bangs and that. It seems to me that maybe it's time for promoting that idea more about where good cinema happens, giving it actually the attention that it deserves. Because I just feel sometimes we're very defensive about it.
Well, I think, well, especially when the discussion was here, like, should we go to paper, like back to paper, or should we use the internet? I think one of the sort of what you mentioned now as well, one of the sort of spaces that we seem to not use or not optimize are our own cinemas. And right in front of the film, you have about 15 minutes because people are late or have to buy stuff. So what we are trying to do at Kino is try to with the movie trailers that we make for our own retrospectives and special programming, because then people are in their seats. They're going to watch a premiere film, so they're going to watch a new film, but we try to then, with that trailer, sort of put the experience that they had watching a film or maybe something they haven't seen before, and in that cinematic space, so with the good sound, good editing, well, as far as, you know, we do it ourselves. And also we brand ourselves with that content. So. Yeah, it's sort of a combination of these three, and it's free. I mean, it's absolutely free. These people are already in here, so this is the best way to advertise what you really want them to experience.
So yeah, that link between the cinema as the place you first fall in love with. We talk about we tend to again think film to film. That's coming quite a lot, but actually, it's the place, it's the experience, and film as an art form that is separate and different. seems to me what you're talking about. We need to find ways perhaps to push that even more.
Yeah, well, if you're dependent on film, and that's what a lot of people were talking about as well. I mean, like it's hard. In 2019, you had so many like big crossover titles that it's really hard to now say like I'm doing worse than 2019 in 2022 because the films haven't been up to par. So I think it's up to the cinemas themselves to realize that people are they're not going to a movie, they're going to a movie theater, and that theater is where they have a beer or they have a burger or a special wine or something like that, and they meet people. So they go to a place, they don't really go to a film. Of course, it's important to have that film, but they will choose, because that film can be seen in multiple places, they choose for you because of the fact that you are trying to emphasize and brand yourself as a place that they want to be associated with. You know, people are desperate to belong to something. Okay, this is a bit too archaeological, but or anthropological, but it is. I mean, people really like to belong to something and sort of identify with that place, or with the fact that you show something on 35 millimeter. People love that, and you know, we have a 70 millimeter projector installed 2 years ago, and actually after the screening, people want to see it, so they actually, you know, and have a picture and stuff like that, and sort of get explained how it works. And I think that really binds people. And it's, I mean, for 2001, it's a movie everybody's seen hundreds of times, but still on 70 millimeter we sell out. So I think it's that experience and the way that you sort of add something to an evening of someone, which is way more important than content.
Yeah, let me come up to Louise if I can, because I know we were talking about some of the same things. The cinema experience is great, but some of the cinema culture is broader than just the place. And I know you have some concerns about how the cinema culture has kind of contracted over recent years. So, José Luis, can you there? Do you hear me?
Okay, I'm going to talk in Spanish because my English is too aggressive. I don't want to feel angry with me. Sí. Bueno.
A short introduction to start with. Throughout the day, I've been listening to how we can create events in the cinema. Well, as a festival, we are an event. The event is part of our DNA. So we have to follow the opposite track. A festival is a place for resistance. We're more necessary than ever before. We started as a programmer 10, 20, 30 years ago. Now we're all in the same boat, in fact. We're all part of the same team. And this is what's changed. That's quite clear. So there's this toing and froing in the cinematographic industry. Our work spans the whole year, even if there's only 9 days of festival. We play a very relevant role in our work because we actually connect audiences with exhibitors, with distributors, and festivals are important in terms of the visibility of films and also because of their for the sake of their subsequent circulation. I'll say two important things. One is fairly basic, but it really works well. Exhibitors have to know the films they program really well. That is a very simple statement. For a couple of years now, we have all these independent distributors. During the festival, we have lots of distributors, and we try to ensure that the exhibitors in the festival can also go and see which of these films they want to screen and how they can connect with the right public, because publics aren't the same. They change from one city to another. So you have to have this knowledge of your publics. And we all have festivals, we have exhibitors, we have distributors. Where do people learn about the films we're going to be screening? That's the basic issue. It's like a Pandora's box. It's a question of communication. The cinema has lost 15, 20%, yet in terms of communication, we're always using the same means, and there's an awful lot of confusion. You go onto a platform, there are lots of series, and in films you have, for films you have movie theaters, but that is not necessarily true anymore, so this is a tricky issue. When you have a round table on this matter, well, I think you have to be very careful, because there's this huge confusion. Independent entities invited people to attend a round table on the cinema, and they said, what's happening with the cinema? And people are very reluctant. They need to organize a round table with the main media in Spain. That's what they wanted to do, but it proved almost impossible. And that's the real issue. We're all going to have to fight when it comes to proper communication. I don't know whether you can follow my line of reasoning.
I can. I mean, if we're going to fight, you've got to have the weapons to do it. And we don't. One of those things is the connection between film and those theatres has got to be better than it is, you're saying, and that you've got to believe in the product that you're doing, and you've got to, in order to move on to that next stage. And it isn't just the simple solutions of, I mean, going back to a papyrus scroll. That's what we hipster marketeers are using these days, the real has-beens. But the idea that it's paper, or the idea of anything, it's not. It's about, in order to create the connections with the audience, you need to have created the connection with film in a stronger way, I think is your argument. Am I right?
Absolutamente, pero también hay que...
Yes, it's exactly that. We have to work on the film right from the very beginning. The first connection the public has with a film is with the previews. And I think we festivals can be useful in that respect. We have lots of experience with previews. It's the first time people learn about a film, and it's a form of education. We need to work with various institutes, with teachers. We have lots and lots of spectators. We have a special department for a communication department. Each film that is screened has to be worked on one by one. It's a huge amount of work. It takes a lot of time, and exhibitors don't have the right infrastructure or time to do this, but I think that festivals can do this work for the films, and therefore we can contribute quite a lot. And we have the contacts, the links with young people who should be involved in the actual screening in a festival. For the last 5 years, we've been working with young people, young programmers, who help select films, and then they work in the various departments of the festival. Young journalists who cover the event and talk about the films will be proposing in the festival, and this also establishes wonderful links. There's an association of festivals, Scanorama, and all sorts of things, and we all work to ensure that these films have the greatest possible visibility beyond our festival.
I wonder if there's something missing, though, and we've talked about this before, but what if one of the things that's missing is that the mainstreaming of kind of criticism of really deep writing about, proper writing about film that used to be in the newspapers in the days when newspapers, and you can't go back there, those things are gone. It's just, we've been talking, there's a film I love called After Sun, which I think many of you probably are showing at the moment, but I love that film, but you can't explain that film and why you love it in a tweet. It just can't be done. And so we've lost part of the superstructure of film, which is all of the stuff around it, which connects the mainstream to this thing. And maybe that's one of the things that's missing.
Claro. Y que justamente...
Yes, exactly. In terms of means of communication, if you need to have the right themes, you need to have coverage by the media. And of course, After Sun, it's a fabulous film. I think it won the New Wave Section Award in Seville. And the film, moreover, was part of the independent film market. And we're preparing a special section with young people on this film. It's something, well, the distributor is excellent. You have wonderful independent Spanish distributors. They hadn't planned what to do with the film when it was first released in Spain. There was a room full of young 17 or 18-year-olds, and there's a plan for next year. The idea is to work with independent distributors and do tests with this young public.
Yeah, I'm going to move on, but I think you're making a really important point. But I think it's at the heart of this, which is this may be the best time in history to be a cinephile. If you are already committed, I mean, the things that you can go and see anywhere, the things you can find on the platforms, the writers that you can go to, but the crossover, which maybe goes back to Aurélie's point, the bit that a wider public who may be the cinephiles of tomorrow. It seems like there's a disconnection there somewhere that needs to be resolved. Before I come to, I'm going to bring, if I may, Katarzyna, I'm going to, no, actually, I will bring you in next. What I want to do quickly is have Jan, you were actually going to say something which was quite important in terms of the place, and you had a video, and I just skipped past it. If you've got a...
That's all right, you can do it now.
Yeah, do it, quick.
Well, the thing is that we make our own trailers, and we try to bring back people after COVID, which was, of course, a bit of a depressing time. So we didn't really want to go very art housey, so we had heist films. Heist films are sort of at the core. There's always a robbery or something like that, but there's always it spans all these genres. So what we wanted to do with the promotion from this is show sort of the core of this heist film, but then with a couple of tentpole films like Heat and The Italian Job, wanted to show people the smaller films like the Friends of Eddie Coyle, Cops and Robbers, so small titles, so we can pull people back in with sort of big entertainment, and then sort of try to broaden their horizons a little bit. And also, programming and marketing for us are one. So I think I as a programmer of special content, sort of try to communicate with Zuleya from marketing, which she was actually did a presentation here this morning, so that the communication is one, so that people understand what we try to do with the programming and how we try to tell that story. So yeah, I guess if you can.
Yeah. Can we show that? It's someone. I think it's the next. Oh, there we go.
What time is it, Mr. Green?
Shall we synchronize our watches? architectural, electrical, engineering plans.
The board's already built to go straight into the CPU.
Your rent covers the risk. 830,000, 4 million at wholesale and unmounted stones. That's the fifth alarm.
It's not sudden. Preparation, preparation, preparation. As far as the actual job's concerned, it's a piece of piss.
I have an idea how to make this work.
Anytime you take a chance, you better be sure the rewards are worth the risk.
The bank is worth the risk.
Any minute now. Your attention, please. Rock and roll.
Open the door.
Let's go, we gotta go, let's go!
The fuck is it open? Open it.
On the floor, asshole! The money's insured, but it's not worth dying for.
What did you do? I said, what did you do? You hit the alarm. April Fool, motherfuckers.
Give me a fucking break, I am sorry!
Okay, so again, what we're trying to answer here is there is an idea of cinema culture which needs to be broadened again in order to get those people back in, as Aurélie was saying. And this kind of approach of programming in ways that excite and actually play to the power of film actually doesn't, old doesn't mean old people watch it. Old is a mechanism also for exciting new audiences and making them fall in love with film.
Yeah, so it should be a mix of young and old, and we shouldn't like really be so hard on old people as well, because they have a lot of money. So you know, if they come in, you know, like young people, they come in, they watch the movie, and they bring their own Red Bull. But I mean, like old people, they, you know, order a bottle of wine. So we welcome old people as much as young people.
I don't really like the way you're looking at me while you're saying this, but as an old person with very little money, I can tell you that argument doesn't work. But anyway, let's skip on from that. As Katarzyna, so from first of all, just give us a little bit, so from a sales point of view, where does film fit in? Because we've heard lots about this ecosystem and sales, the idea that maybe film is taking a less of a prominent role. But just tell us how you feel and your strategy as far as film, the art form, is concerned.
Well, a lot of have been said already, so I'm not going to repeat all those people before me. But obviously, the main things that we are observing now is fragmentation of the markets on all of the aspects. The way we have to communicate, the way the people are choosing films, the way that there are like different sectors there are like so many different niche audiences that you have to address, and also it's difficult to do it in a synchronized way, because also the way that people are accessing information, the reviews, the information cycle that is coming together with premieres across the world, not just in your region or in your language area or particular country. This is really difficult to just go to those kind of default strategies that we were so much used to. And I think that I'm observing that especially in France, because there were a lot of like easy ways, like the easy way to go with the films, the obvious channels of communication, the obvious ways to market films. We are now kind of learning anew how to structure this from scratch per each film. And this is of course difficult, because if you have, like we do, 8 films per year, it's easier to come up with a special strategy for each and every one. Although also for us it became more work intensive. We have to, it's like we are learning things like our clients, our distributors in Europe or across the world, they cannot secure reviews for the film if they don't have interview with the director. So we have to work more on making the talents available. We have to work more on organizing, I don't know, digital junkets, also to not to go crazy with the traveling and stuff, because we are trying to build sustainable markets also from the ecological point of view. So these are all new things. And when I have been listening now to the discussion, I also thought that we are still kind of elitist in our approach to the audiences, and we want to rebuild something that is very old school and very traditional in a way. So we want to treat them with organic wine and organic bread. Maybe they just want popcorn, and they want films, not like they want special films, but they want also films to be enjoying. I mean, it's like they're fun. And this is very difficult to bring those to the public. And I don't think it's only because the talents are being stolen away from Netflix, which I dearly hate. And I still believe that the kind of proposal that they offer is something between something very engineered and extremely arrogant in terms of artistic freedom. So there is like no middle ground, and fortunately for us, this means that cinema is not threatened by them. But it also means that the audiences are getting used to mediocre content, and they're maybe consuming more and more things that just like calm them down, like we discussed it with the series. This is not something that they are watching because they need some thought-provoking material. They just want to go to sleep. I do it myself. I just subscribe to the platforms that offer House MD, The Mentalist, and Supernatural. I don't care for the new series. They just like, they bring some emotional turmoil for me, and I don't need that. And if I need something special, then I go to a cinema and I take my daughter, but she wants popcorn and nachos, so I can bring her to Peanut Butter Falcon. I can bring her to Come On, Come On. I can take her to Nope, and she will love those films because they're special. And you have to also remember that if we want to bring audiences back to the cinemas, we have to remind them that there is like a special experience, and this content is a little bit different from what they can expect to see on a small screen. And this, I wouldn't use also the word quality here. This is just, sometimes it's prestige, sometimes it's just like a different kind of experience, and we have to kind of protect that heritage of cinema to make it still stand out, to be like a unique experience without being like saying that the TV series are not a valid work of art, because they are.
Well, I thought that was fantastic. So if people may not have, I don't think people said those things in quite that way. Really, really clear, the argument. But I think what we're talking about here is that when we would talk about an art form, it's also, I think there's a broader culture around film. There is a cinema culture that covers everything, all the way over from critics to food to all this thing. That was all there. And it feels like during the pandemic, parts of that infrastructure fell apart. And we're now trying to work out how to rebuild it, but you're saying you rebuild around what you're good at, and you accept that there are some things you're just not going to compete.
I think that there is a basic contradiction between cinema as it used to be, being a mass culture, and now the expectations of the audiences that are trained for the content to be fine-tuned to their individual needs. So there's like a bias that we cannot overcome. And I think maybe we have to just get used to the idea that we cannot expect the same kind of mass numbers of admissions in cinemas ever. Maybe not. Maybe we have to fine-tune our expectations and the work the number of films we acquire, the number of money we invest, the way we work with them, to be prepared also that it's going to be more intense, and then we have to go film by film rather than follow just like the strategies that we are used to. I think what Jose Luis was saying was very valid, because like I don't have an idea yet, but I think this is a very valid direction for the distributors and exhibitors to be working more and more with festivals, who are crucial platforms for this kind of films, and to get those collaborations closer in a commercial way, because like during COVID, we could also observe festivals becoming sort of competitors for the distributors, opening up their own online platforms and trying to cannibalize the existing audiences in those territories. And rather than doing that, maybe they should, I mean, it sounds very idealistic, but I believe it's a good direction. They should look for synergies and how to collaborate rather than to do a different thing. It's like one of my favorite panels on distributions and new approaches was in Sevilla a few years back when Cristina from Portugal was discussing the way she programs her little cinema in a way to make sure that there are commercial films, that there are more art house driven films. She's also having a festival, she's also the distributor. This is all connected, all the collaborations within Spain between exhibitors and distributors, trying to organize things together and come up to join efforts, because you cannot do it by yourself, but maybe if you do it in a bigger group as an association with some extra funds, then maybe there is like more potential to push those films through.
Yeah, it's because there's two competing ideas that probably are true. They're both equally true. One is that we kind of fell off our bike during COVID, and you know, we now need to pick ourselves back up again and reintroduce people. But the second one you're talking about is perhaps a longer-term trend, which comes down to the fragmentation of society more generally. That maybe the argument is we just have to accept that people are now fragmented into groups that choose and have certain cultures and certain societies. You build around those, and you don't worry too much if it doesn't connect with another part of your culture. That fragmentation is necessary. It seems to me there's two things. One is I think there's a worrying social element, because I think social fragmentation of that sort was what cinema used to be to an extent an antidote to, and I think political fragmentation and a lack of connection between each other is pretty dangerous. And the second thing is the economic model. From a sales point of view, an economic model around a fragmented kind of niche approach feels like it's something that's going to need, going back to that previous panel, quite a serious rethink.
Well, it's, I think we're in very difficult times because it's like an avalanche of problems going our way from each and every direction. So there's war, there's energy crisis, this ecological crisis. We all try to kind of make do in all those circumstances, which is not really possible, I think. And it's like, and if there's one expense people are gonna skip, is the cinema. I mean, obviously there's an opportunity because people maybe will not also be able to afford more expensive ways of entertaining themselves, so maybe it's going to be a back and forth, people coming back to cinema because they cannot afford a dinner anymore. That might also be a case, but this is all very troubling, and I don't think we can make like valid predictions, which I think we could also observe this year. I'm closely observing all the HBO, Warner, Discovery, potentially Universal merger, and the kind of rationale that comes with, and at some point we are trusting those big platforms and big players that they know what they're doing, and now we see that they're a little bit chaotic in whatever they endeavor, and this is not a pattern we could use and extrapolate from. So we have to be like more focused on our local realities, most likely, because it's also, from sales agents' perspective, I can also see that the films are working not necessarily in the same way across different markets. Just to use an example of one of our films, Icelandic Oscar entry Lamb from the last year, that we sold basically everywhere, but the only territories that it really worked really well at the box office was US, when it did like 3 million, and Japan, where it did close to 1 million. And in all other territories, sometimes the results were decent, but sometimes it tanked completely. So it's also not a question of there is like one kind of quality content, but we have to be aware that within our markets there are different films that work. And I think a dialogue with cinemas could also, I have no idea what's the feedback loop apart from the reports. If there are any channels of communication between EUROPA Cinemas, EUROPA Distribution, to make sure that we use the information from the local market in the way we acquire films.
Yeah, no, it's work. It's an avalanche worse than a tsunami, by the way. I'm not quite sure. I'm running out of my metaphors now, but I think the really core point is looking at EUROPA Cinemas is you've got a lot of work to do, I think, over now. This feels like I see a possibility of making this work, but it's going to, more and more, you're going to need that collaboration, you're going to need those ideas, you're going to need that kind of data, you're going to need that dialogue. There's nothing you're saying that that you could necessarily say is wrong, but there's nothing that you're listening to that isn't saying it's going to get harder to work in this business rather than easier. I don't see a nice easy route. So thanks for leaving us with that. That's a useful thing. But Stefano, you've obviously seen a fair few trends over the years, but it's just give us a reaction first to what you're hearing, and do you recognise that sense of where we now are as an industry?
Yes, I've heard a lot of interesting things, and so let's try and make a little bit of order. So there's too many films. Yes, there's not enough good films, because people nowadays, when they go to the cinema, and this it needs to be strengthened, but also enlarged, because we need big numbers to sustain the number of cinemas. They go to the cinema because they need the event, and not every movie can be an event. It's impossible. It's just impossible, because, as Katarzyna was saying, if every single time you need to handle it, you need to build it, you need to build it's starting again. It's starting again and again and again every time. It's like, that film with Bill Murray. Every morning you were waking up the same, and you were starting again. The only difference with the movie is that you're starting again on something completely different, because it's a different movie, it's a different target audience, it's a different group you're speaking to. And the real challenge today, and I've noticed it going back to the theater, not the cinema. And in Rome, there's this theater in the center of Rome where there's a gigantic video screen. And normally the communication was cinema. Outdoor was cinema. So the first time I went back to the theater, there was a Netflix series. Second time, there was a Universal film. Third time, there was an Amazon film. So basically, the platforms have got into the communication that cinema used to use. And there is confusion. There has been, also in Italy, but everywhere, this huge discussion about windowing. The problem with windowing is that the audience is confused, is extremely confused, because it's the worst kept secret, the fact that every movie would go on television at one point of its life. Was it a secret? Come on, it's a joke. But there was this feeling that there was a certain length of time, 3 months, 6 months, 7 months, a year, whatever. Now it's confused. Why? Because we've got communication from media about something that is going on this platform, the other platform, in cinema, on this, on that, on the other. And so the consumer is confused. What is true, and the video that Jan prepared, and it's the same feeling by seeing this video that I had when I'm in a cinema museum, either in LA or in Turin, is that everything you see, everything you remember, is something you have discovered in cinema. That is the strength of cinema. The fact that, and it's important, and it's the reason why, for example, as distributors, we work with Netflix, because we thought that Roma should have been shown and discovered in a cinema, like The Irishman, like Paolo Sorrentino's movie, which, by the way, was one of the most successful Italian movies last year. But again, all these movies, we were able to bring them out there because we managed to create the event. On a ton of other movies, that wasn't possible, because the competition has become so strong. It's not time for amateurs anymore. Probably in this room there are the best exhibitors in Europe. A lot of exhibitors are not as good. A lot of distributors are not as good. A lot of producers are producing just terrible films because they find too much money too easily, which is fine because it's economy, it's, you know, it's jobs and all of that, but it doesn't help us. And not like it was told before, not every movie has to go. I've heard a lot, you know, circulation, circulation, circulation. It's about discoverability, you know, discovering the movies, having the people to make them discover, because a lot of these movies are available on all these giant platforms, but they're hidden out there. And so the job of the exhibitors and the distributors that should work, absolutely, you know. I think that the best examples we are having these days are when we can work with exhibitors in the best possible way to join forces and bring the audience back. But it's an issue, it's a problem, because today, the content is available everywhere, and I don't totally agree that the content that is on the platforms is different, because the difference from before, in Italy, we used to call it fiction. Okay? Fiction was TV movies, TV series. But, you know, today you've got Paolo Sorrentino, Young Pope. You have Luca Guadagnino, that did This Is Us, or whatever it was called. You've got Ferzan Özpetek doing TV series. You've got Scorsese doing TV series. I'm just watching these days, Wednesday, Tim Burton. You know, what is he doing? He's doing The Addams Family, which a few years ago did a ton of money in the theaters, and now there's a TV series. But what's the difference? It's 4 films. You know, everybody sees 4 films in one time, and time is there. It's 24 hours a day. You don't have enough time. So cinema has become important. It's always important to discover, but it's become something together with other things. So if you want and I say it every time, my solution, you know, you have to bring kids. You have to bring kids in school, because, you know, kids are exposed to the phones. I don't have it here with me now. Every single day for 20 whatever hours a day. The kids are there with these videos, and they go on YouTube, and they go on Facebook, they go everywhere, they go to the cinema, they watch Netflix, they watch TV series and everything. But they don't have the education. So why, you know, throughout Europe, the best possible idea would be that, you know, every school, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, education, image education, and then once a month you bring them to the cinema, and then they come back. You know, when I was a kid, I used to start, in Italy there was art, and then, you know, you lose 10 and other 20 will go back, and then you lose them and then they come back. But if you don't give them the education, it will be the market. And as Catarzino would say, you know, many of these TV series, some of them are up there, but some of them are really bad. You know, the films, because it's the algorithm, and everything that is built with the algorithm, come on, it's built on something, and it doesn't look the future. So that I think it's something that we have to, the strength and the means to fight through cinema and through, you know, discovering things on a big screen, which is the most important, exciting way of discovering them.
Fantastic. I mean, I get that completely, that there is that there's a difference. And actually, if you look at the series that are working, I mean, The Addams Family is quite a good example, but actually a lot of those TV dramas or those series are driven by former, you know, they started off, whether it's Star Wars or anything else. The question for me is still, that I'm still not sure about from the panel even. It feels to me, as someone who perhaps didn't go through school being educated on it, but learned the power of, which perhaps is different with an art cinema. So if it's where you get the intimate, by things being blown up to a giant size, you feel an intimate story, you feel the empathy, you feel, which is what art cinema does really well. And yet cinema is still being pushed at the children you're talking about about very much as a roller coaster. It's you know, and resolution isn't an emotional coming together. Resolution is someone with a bigger gun than the other one, or a superpower. And it feels to me like, how do we get across, other than education, how do we get across the power of cinema that you say still exists? And are we helped by having by putting on bad films? For you, are there enough good films to be able to tell that story of the discoverability of great cinema today that will excite people and rebuild that market?
This is the real question. And the colleague before that was saying, have you noticed there's not many American films out there? I think they're a step ahead, and they've already changed the way of doing things, and they're using the cinemas for what? For these big, gigantic roller coasters. And they're working, by the way. They're working. The thing that we have to say and we have to realize, and somebody was saying it just earlier, is that a cinema survives by doing everything. Then, of course, there are art house cinemas that are more specialized. As distributors, it's important we have a variety of things, because nowadays there's not something that works everywhere. There is fragmentation even there. Once upon a time, we used to buy a movie, we used to sell it in cinemas, then in video, then in pay, then in free. Now I have a long list of films that are unsold free TV. Because free TV is mainstream, is something different. There are areas. I would like a movie that pays my movies, my art house movies, the price that I need. But they're not paying the price I need, not because they're...
Yeah. I understand, of course.
But it's just because there's not enough audience, there's not enough money. So the model doesn't work there enough. So the Americans seems to have understood what the theater of the future will be. We hope there's enough audience. That's the problem. You know, my concern is that in Italy, with 40 to 45 million admissions this year, maybe, and it was 105, 110. How can it be sustained? So you need public money, of course, but how long can it go?
Yeah, so we need to get those, but it's an economic issue at the end of the day too, so it follows on. So has anyone we've got time for a couple of questions. Have anyone got any points they'd like to make or questions? There's one over here somewhere. Right at the front.
Hello, thank you. My name's Tara Judah. I'm from the UK. I'm a freelancer. I'm not currently working in cinemas, but I have for a long time. I used to work at Watershed in Bristol. And I just wanted to ask something, I guess, about collaboration in terms of particularly children's content, collaboration with like games developers and things like that, because it seems to me, particularly talking about what the television studios are doing and what they're doing slightly differently, is that quite often children's TV shows that they will watch, and they will sit and watch endless episodes of back to back on TV, also have apps on tablets that have been developed so that when they kind of finish watching that content, they then engage with it more interactively. And I just wondered, in terms of like, if we're thinking about how children are developing cinema-going habits, when they go to the cinema, the film finishes, but then there's not usually some other interactive element for them to continue to kind of go back and do, or something to kind of keep that loop of interest going.
Yeah, it's a point well made. So that idea, I mean, we used to talk about transmedia and multimedia, but that idea that you bring in the value of games and gamification, I kind of hate that word, but that idea of building, not being too pure in what we do, maybe not even papery.
I wanted to make an old person's comment that the only interactive element you have after you go to cinema is a conversation, and normally if you don't have have that tool, it's pretty tough, because I don't think that technologically it's possible to make that connection, and I don't think it would be welcome. I think it's the distinctive nature of cinema that has to be nourished in a way. And again, I'm not speaking from elitist point of view. It's more like how to make it fun again, more like discounts at the bar, or like for them to be able to hang out in the mall after they see the cinema, and or like how to encourage parents to take their kids with them and discuss. I'm sorry, very old school, but...
Which, by the way, is the problem with the American Marvel movies. All the kids go immediately because they're scared of the other kids telling them how it ends. So it's an interesting, you know...
It's a real mystery what happens at the end of Marvel films. The one with the superpowers wins, but I know what you mean. We had a question just here.
Sì, sono Mimmo Di Noia e vengo dall'Italia, ho delle sale cinematografiche a Milano.
I come from Italy and from Milan. I show art house films. Today we've heard about a lot of experiences, beautiful experiences, told by people who have a movie theater and who are doing extraordinary work. But despite everything, in Italy, we stand at minus 55% admissions, minus 40 in Germany, a huge drop in Spain. So all these experiences are important, but they're not sufficient. Why? I'd like to say two things, first of all. People who produce films, if we want them to continue to believe in the cinema as part of the business, the producer is not just someone who produces a film for the love of it. He does this because he wants to make money. So either we're still in a position to create money and be an important component on the market, or it will be even more complicated in the future. Second point, which is extremely important, festivals, the EU. During the pandemic, during these 2.5 years, we experienced a change for the cinemas. Platforms in Italy use the word cinema to say, we are bringing the cinema home to you at home. No, platforms don't bring films to people at home. They remove the value of the word cinema. The cinema is a place. It's not just a film. So we have to take up this point, focus on this space, this cultural and social area or venue, which led the EU to pinpoint in the cinema an important cultural element in Europe. We have to put this at the center of the question. Our countries must intervene to support movie theaters. That's what we need to do. What's important is the cinema as a venue, not just the films. Festivals are very important. They're wonderful. It was said that there is an ever closer link between movie theaters and festivals. That's absolutely true. We need to have this close relationship. Our movie theaters in Europe project mainly films that have won prizes in festivals. They've gone through festivals. So festivals need increasingly, particularly now, need to support the movie theaters. We have to ensure that these films are seen in the movie theaters afterwards. I heavily criticize festivals like Venice, who allowed 5 Netflix films to compete, and they won't even be seen in movie theaters subsequently. This kind of choice does serious harm to movie theaters. The fact that a major film like Argentina or whatever, this is one of the most beautiful films we saw in Venice, but we couldn't actually then see it in the movie theaters. It was impossible. So we have to work together. We have to wage a cultural battle. This cultural battle should place at the center the value of the experience of cinema going. Otherwise, I think our future will be very difficult.
just to kind of sum up the discussion, I mean, it feels like what we're saying is we're in a period of change, and it feels like we've been saying that for a hell of a long time. But the kind of crisis you have now may concentrate minds in ways which can actually help us. And I think we heard some good examples here of how we've got to reconnect with our own art form in some ways. We've got to understand how that art form connects with audiences, and we may need to rebuild links, and that may be through paper. I'm maybe not quite as much of a paper fan as everywhere else. It seems kind of there are lots of other ways. There are lots of formats. Tara's point, actually, that we can be dismissive, but actually the point that was being made there was we need to find every link, every opportunity to create those relationships. But at the heart of this is still the belief that cinema does something different. It does something which, it's a memory creation place. It's a place that actually does something that you don't get from a day-to-day screen. And that is not in any way to decry the value of television. But the emotional response you get from this unique art form, which has lasted more than 100 years, can't be underestimated. But what we're hearing, and is the right word to use for this session, we're going to have to fight for every bit of this. We can't just expect audiences with a million other options, and some of them very exciting and interesting options. We've got to accentuate every single thing that we do. We've got to make all of the curatorial skills, the education skills. We've got to rebuild a film culture that actually is in tune with the realities of today's world. And I think if I was starting that with that mission now, what I would probably do is to get hundreds of art house cinemas together from all around Europe and see if we could put them together in some kind of network and maybe create some kind of workshops around. It's just an idea, but I'm handing that over to you as the next option. So thanks to the panel. And I'll hand you over to the wonderful Art House Tales again with Maddie.
Thank you.